The chandelier in the Hawthorne family dining room glittered like a constellation trapped in crystal, casting shards of light across the polished mahogany table. Laughter and clinking glasses filled the air, a symphony of celebration that drowned out the soft ticking of the antique clock on the mantel. It was the annual Hawthorne family gathering, a tradition steeped in pride and performance, where achievements were paraded like trophies and silence was mistaken for surrender. At the head of the table, Clara Hawthorne held court, her voice a vibrant crescendo that commanded every ear in the room. Her auburn hair caught the light, her gestures animated as she recounted her latest triumph, a keynote speech at a national marketing conference that had earned her a standing ovation. "And then," Clara said, leaning forward, her emerald eyes sparkling, "the CEO of Vantage Corp himself told me my strategy pitch was game-changing." "Game-changing! Can you believe it?" She tossed her head back, laughing, as her family erupted in applause. Her mother Evelyn beamed with pride, her diamond earrings glinting as she nodded approvingly. Her father Richard raised his glass, his deep voice booming, "To Clara, our star!" Across the table, Sophie Hawthorne sat quietly, her fingers tracing the rim of her untouched wine glass. Her dark hair was pulled into a loose bun, a few strands framing her pale, thoughtful face. She wore a simple navy dress, unadorned, blending into the background, like a shadow cast by Clara's brilliance. Her hazel eyes, sharp and observant, flickered toward her sister, then dropped back to the table. No one noticed the faint curve of her lips, a secret smile that held more weight than the room's collective cheer. "Sophie, darling," Evelyn said suddenly, her tone syrupy with concern. "You've barely said a word. Are you feeling all right?" The table's attention swiveled to Sophie, a spotlight she instinctively shrank from. Clara smirked, leaning back in her chair, her fingers drumming lightly on the tablecloth. "I'm fine, Mom," Sophie replied softly, her voice steady but low, like a whisper of wind through leaves. "Just listening." "Listening," Clara echoed, her tone teasing, almost mocking. "That's our Sophie, always listening. You know, you could try saying something once in a while. Maybe tell us about your... what is it you do again? Data entry or something?" A ripple of laughter spread through the table, light but cutting, like a blade wrapped in silk. Sophie's expression didn't falter, but her fingers tightened briefly around her glass. "Something like that," Sophie murmured, her voice barely audible over the clatter of silverware. She didn't correct Clara. She never did. Not here, not in this room where Clara's charisma was currency and Sophie's quiet was mistaken for lack. But beneath her calm exterior, a fire burned. A fire fueled by a truth no one at this table suspected. Unbeknownst to her family, Sophie Hawthorne was the co-founder of DataWeave, a tech company valued at over $80 million. 0 cents. She and her college friend Max had built it from a dorm room dream into a powerhouse, its analytics system revolutionizing industries from finance to healthcare. Sophie had designed the core algorithms herself, her mind a labyrinth of code and logic that turned raw data into gold, yet she chose to remain invisible. Her name absent from press releases, her face unknown to the public. She thrived in the shadows, where she could create without the weight of expectation. Clara, oblivious to her sister's secret, continued her performance. "You know," she said, swirling her wine, "I'm thinking of applying to DataWeave. They're the hottest tech firm right now. Everyone's talking about them. I'd kill it in their marketing department. Imagine me running their campaigns." She grinned, her confidence infectious, drawing nods and murmurs of agreement from the family. Sophie's eyes lifted, meeting Clara's for a fleeting moment. A spark of amusement flickered in her gaze, unnoticed by her sister. Clara had no idea that Sophie would be the one reviewing her application. No idea that the boring younger sister she so casually dismissed held the keys to her ambition. The seeds of this moment had been planted years ago, in a childhood where Clara's boldness and Sophie's reticence shaped their roles in the Hawthorne family. Clara, 4 years older, had always been the sun, bright, unmissable, demanding attention. She'd starred in school plays, won debate tournaments, and charmed every teacher with her quick wit. Sophie, by contrast, was the moon. Quiet, reflective, her brilliance visible only to those who looked closely. She'd spent her childhood in libraries, devouring books on mathematics and computer science, her mind a quiet engine of curiosity. Their parents, well-meaning but dazzled by Clara's sparkle, often overlooked Sophie's gifts. "She's just shy," Evelyn would say, patting Sophie's head as if she were a delicate bird. "She'll grow out of it." Richard, a retired investment banker, valued results he could see: trophies, headlines, applause. Clara delivered those in spades. Sophie's achievements, a perfect score on a coding competition, a scholarship to MIT, were quieter, less tangible to a family that measured success in decibels. The sisters' dynamic crystallized at a family dinner when Sophie was 16. Clara, home from college, had regaled the table with stories of her internship at a top PR firm. Sophie, who had just won a regional hackathon, tried to share her news. "That's nice, sweetie," Evelyn had said, distracted, before turning back to Clara. "Now, Clara, tell us more about that client meeting." Clara had caught Sophie's eye, her smile sharp. "Don't worry, Soph," she'd whispered later. "Not everyone's cut out for the spotlight." That moment had seared itself into Sophie's memory. Not out of resentment, she didn't begrudge Clara her confidence, but as a quiet vow, she would succeed on her own terms, in her own way, without needing the world's applause. That vow had led her to Max, a brilliant but chaotic computer science major she'd met at MIT. Max was all energy, his ideas spilling out faster than he could articulate them. Sophie was his counterbalance, her precision grounding his vision. Together they'd built DataWeave, a company that turned chaos into clarity. Back at the dining table, the conversation had shifted to Clara's latest conquest, a potential partnership with a luxury brand. Sophie listened, her mind half on the discussion, half on the email she'd received that morning. DataWeave was on the verge of signing a contract with a Fortune 500 company, a deal that would push their valuation past $100 million, 0 cents. Max had been ecstatic, texting her in all caps, "We did it! So you're a genius," she'd replied with a single emoji, a smile. Because that was enough. The victory was hers, private and complete. "Sophie?" Clara's voice cut through her thoughts, sharp and playful. "You're zoning out again. What's going on in that head of yours? Dreaming about spreadsheets?" The table chuckled, and Sophie felt the familiar weight of their assumptions. To them, she was the quiet one, the unremarkable one, content with a small life. "I was just thinking," Sophie said, her voice soft but clear, "about how appearances can be deceiving." The words hung in the air, a subtle challenge that no one quite grasped. Clara raised an eyebrow, her smile faltering for a fraction of a second before she laughed it off. "Deep thoughts from Sophie?" Clara said, winking at the table. "Maybe you should come work at DataWeave. I could use someone to organize my files." The laughter returned, louder this time, and Sophie let it wash over her. She didn't need their approval. She never had. Later that evening, as the family dispersed into the living room for coffee and dessert, Sophie slipped away to the balcony. The night was crisp, the city skyline a mosaic of lights against the dark. She leaned against the railing, her phone buzzing in her pocket. It was Max, his message a mix of excitement and urgency. "Clara Hawthorne, just applied for the senior marketing role. Says she's your sister." "What? You never mentioned she's a shark. Her resume's killer, but..." "You okay with this?" Sophie stared at the message, her lips curving into that secret smile again. Clara, with her boundless confidence, had walked straight into Sophie's world without realizing it. The application would land on Sophie's desk tomorrow, part of her role as DataWeave's silent gatekeeper. She could already imagine Clara's pitch. Bold, polished, dripping with charm, it ran on substance, on the kind of quiet strength Clara had never understood. She typed a quick reply to Max. "Let her apply. I'll handle it." Then she pocketed her phone and looked out at the city. Her city, where she'd built an empire no one in that dining room could see. The irony was delicious. Clara, who thrived on being seen, was blind to the sister who held her future in her hands. The next morning, Sophie sat in her corner office at DataWeave's headquarters, a sleek, glass-walled space that contrasted with her understated presence. The office was a sanctuary of order. White walls, a single potted plant, a desk cluttered with monitors displaying streams of data. Max burst in, his curly hair a mess, his energy electric. "Soph, you gotta see this," he said, tossing a tablet onto her desk. "Clara's application. She's got balls, I'll give her that. Says she's the visionary DataWeave needs. You sure you're cool with this?" Sophie glanced at the tablet, her sister's resume glowing on the screen. Clara's headshot was perfect, her smile radiant, her credentials a laundry list of accolades. Sophie felt a flicker of pride. Clara was talented, undeniably so. But talent wasn't enough. Not here. "I'm sure," Sophie said, her voice calm but firm. "Let's see what she brings to the table." Max grinned, sensing the undercurrent in her words. "You're scary when you're quiet, you know that?" Sophie didn't reply. She didn't need to. Her silence was her strength, her weapon, her shield. And as she opened Clara's application, she felt the first stirrings of a reckoning, one that would upend everything her family thought they knew. The stage was set, the players unaware. Clara, with her spotlight and swagger, was about to step into a game she didn't understand. Sophie, with her shadows and secrets, was ready to play. The Hawthorne family dinner had been a microcosm of their lives. Clara celebrated, Sophie overlooked. But the world was bigger than that dining room, and Sophie's quiet strength was about to cast a shadow no one could ignore. The DataWeave headquarters buzzed with the controlled chaos of a company on the cusp of greatness. Glass walls reflected the morning sun, casting prisms across open-plan workstations where engineers typed furiously, their screens alive with streams of code. In the marketing department, Clara Hawthorne was in her element, her voice cutting through the hum as she pitched a campaign to her team. Her tailored blazer and confident stride marked her as a force, a new hire who'd already turned heads with her bold ideas. But beneath her polished exterior, a flicker of unease lingered, a nagging sense that something about DataWeave didn't add up. It had been 2 weeks since Clara's interview, a whirlwind of charisma and credentials that had landed her the senior marketing role. She'd expected resistance, maybe even skepticism, but the process had been oddly smooth. The hiring manager, Max, had grinned through her pitch, his questions sharp but oddly deferential, as if he were waiting for someone else's approval. Clara had brushed it off. Her resume spoke for itself, didn't it? Still, there was a name she kept hearing, whispered in hallways, mentioned in passing during meetings. Sophie. No last name, just Sophie. The elusive co-founder, the brain behind DataWeave's analytics engine, a ghost who never appeared at strategy sessions or investor calls. Clara's curiosity itched like a splinter under her skin. She leaned over her desk, scrolling through a shared drive for campaign data, when a restricted folder caught her eye. Core System Architecture. The file was locked, flagged with a security warning, but a single name glowed in the metadata. Sophie Hawthorne. Clara froze, her breath catching. Sophie Hawthorne. Her sister. The quiet, unassuming Sophie, who faded into the background at family dinners, who Clara had teased for her boring life. It had to be a mistake, a coincidence, surely. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitation warring with instinct. She glanced around. The marketing floor was a flurry of activity, no one watching. With a quick breath, she clicked the file, half expecting an error. Instead, a document opened, dense with technical jargon and diagrams. At the top, in bold, designed by Sophie Hawthorne, co-founder DataWeave. Clara's heart thudded, her mind racing to reconcile the words with the sister she thought she knew. She scrolled, eyes skimming lines of code annotations, patent filings and emails signed with Sophie's name. Each click was a revelation, each document a brick in a wall of truth she hadn't seen coming. Clara slammed her laptop shut, her palms sweaty. Sophie, her sister, was the architect of DataWeave's success? The company valued at $80 million, 0 cents, now flirting with 9 figures, was built on Sophie's mind? The realization hit like a tidal wave, sweeping away years of assumptions. Clara had mocked Sophie's silence, her lack of ambition, while Sophie had been building an empire in the shadow, and Clara, in her arrogance, had waltzed into that empire, boasting about her skills, unaware she was standing on her sister's foundation. Across the building, in her corner office, Sophie sat at her desk, her monitors glowing with real-time analytics. She wore a simple gray sweater, her dark hair tucked behind her ears, her expression serene but focused. Max lounged in a chair across from her, tossing a stress ball in the air. "So," he said, his tone teasing, "your sister's killing it in marketing? Her campaign pitch? Ballsy. You gonna tell her you're the boss yet, or keep playing the invisible genius?" Sophie's lips curved into that secret smile, the one that hid 1,000 calculations. "She'll figure it out," she said softly, her voice a quiet blade. "She always does, eventually." Max raised an eyebrow, catching the stress ball mid-air. "You're spooky, Soph. Most people would be dying to rub it in. Your sister's been trash-talking you for years, and you're just, what, waiting for the perfect moment?" "It's not about rubbing it in," Sophie said, her eyes flicking to her screen. "It's about letting the truth speak for itself." She leaned back, her gaze distant. "Clara's spent her life chasing spotlights. I don't need them. When she sees who I am, it won't be because I told her. It'll be because she can't ignore it." Max shook his head, grinning. "You're a damn mastermind. But when this blows up, and it will, I'm grabbing popcorn." Sophie didn't reply, but her smile deepened. She had always chosen silence, not out of fear or insecurity, but because it was her strength. Silence let her observe, strategize, create without the noise of expectation. She'd built DataWeave in that quiet space, her algorithms a symphony of logic no one else could hear, and now, with Clara in her orbit, the silence was about to break. Clara's discovery gnawed at her through the day, a splinter she couldn't dislodge. She threw herself into work, her pitches sharper, her emails terser, as if productivity could drown out the questions swirling in her mind. Why hadn't Sophie told her? Why let Clara make a fool of herself, applying to a company her sister owned? The betrayal stung, but beneath it was something worse: guilt. Clara replayed years of family dinners, her teasing jabs at Sophie's boring life, her smug assumptions. Each memory was a mirror, reflecting a Clara she didn't want to see. That evening, she stayed late, the office emptying as dusk painted the skyline purple. She opened the restricted folder again, this time digging deeper. She found meeting notes, investor decks, even a Forbes article draft that mentioned Sophie by name, buried in an archive. The article was never published. Sophie had declined the interview, citing privacy. Clara's jaw tightened. Privacy? Or was Sophie hiding, letting Clara's ignorance fuel her own quiet triumph? The sound of footsteps broke her focus. Max appeared, his tie loosened, a coffee cup in hand. "Burning the midnight oil, Hawthorne," he said, his grin too knowing. Clara forced a smile, closing her laptop. "Just catching up. Hey, Max, this Sophie person, the co-founder, she's kind of a mystery, huh?" Max's grin widened, his eyes glinting with mischief. "Ah, Sophie's the real deal. Built this place from nothing. You'd like her. She's got this quiet vibe, but man, she's a force." He paused, his gaze sharpening. "You'll meet her soon enough." Clara's stomach twisted. She wanted to ask more, to demand answers, but Max was already walking away, whistling. She stared at her laptop, the name Sophie Hawthorne burning into her retinas. The truth was undeniable, but what came next was a minefield. The next day, Clara cornered Max in the break room, her voice low but urgent. "Max, level with me. Sophie Hawthorne, she's my sister, isn't she?" Max froze, his coffee halfway to his mouth. For a moment, he looked caught. Then he laughed, a little too loudly. "Whoa, Clara, you don't mess around. Look, that's above my pay grade. Talk to Sophie." "Talk to her?" Clara snapped, her frustration boiling over. "She's been dodging me my whole life, letting me think she's some nobody while she's running this place. Why didn't she tell me?" Max set his coffee down, his expression softening. "Maybe she didn't need to. Maybe she wanted you to see her for real, not just as your quiet little sister." Clara flinched, Max's words cutting deeper than she expected. She turned away, her mind a storm of anger, shame, and something else. Admiration. Sophie had played the long game, and Clara had been too blind to notice. The company gala was a week away, a glittering event to celebrate DataWeave's latest milestone, a $100 million zero-cents contract with a Fortune 500 giant. Sophie had dreaded it for weeks, knowing Max would push her to attend, to finally step into the light. She'd resisted, content to let him take the stage, but Max was relentless. "Sophie," he'd said, cornering her in her office, "you built this. You don't get to hide forever. One night. Show them who you are." Sophie had relented, not because she craved recognition, but because she sensed the moment was inevitable. Clara's discovery had set something in motion, a collision she couldn't avoid. She chose a dress, emerald green, simple but striking, and practiced her speech, her voice steady in the mirror. She wasn't nervous, she was ready. The gala was held in a downtown ballroom, its ceilings draped with fairy lights, its tables gleaming with crystal and silver. Clara arrived early, her red gown a bold contrast to the sea of black tuxedos. She mingled, her smile practiced, but her eyes scanned the room, searching for Sophie. She hadn't confronted her sister yet, hadn't found the words. Part of her wanted to apologize, part of her wanted to scream. When Sophie entered, the room didn't stop. There were no gasps, no dramatic pauses. She slipped in quietly, her presence subtle but magnetic. Clara spotted her immediately, her breath catching. Sophie looked different, taller somehow, her quiet confidence a gravity that pulled eyes without demanding them. She moved through the crowd, shaking hands, her smile warm but reserved. Max took the stage, his voice booming through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we celebrate DataWeave's biggest win yet, but none of this would be possible without the mind behind our success. For the first time, she's agreed to speak. Please welcome Sophie Hawthorne, our co-founder." The applause was thunderous, but Clara barely heard it. She watched Sophie ascend the stage, her movements graceful, deliberate. Sophie's speech was brief but powerful, her words weaving a story of innovation, perseverance, and quiet belief. She didn't boast, she didn't need to. The room hung on her every syllable, and Clara felt the ground shift beneath her. This was Sophie, her sister, her shadow, her equal. As Sophie stepped down, their eyes met across the room. Clara's heart pounded, a mix of pride and regret. She wanted to cross the floor, to say something, but Sophie's gaze held her in place, a silent challenge. "See me now." The aftermath was messy, raw, human. Clara didn't confront Sophie at the gala. She couldn't, not with the weight of the moment pressing down. Instead, she watched, grappling with the reality of Sophie's accomplishments. The next day at the office, Clara's work shifted. Her pitches grew thoughtful, her ideas inspired by Sophie's understated leadership. She proposed a campaign centered on quiet innovation, a nod to the unseen forces that drive success. Max noticed, raising an eyebrow but saying nothing. The real turning point came at a family brunch, a smaller affair than the annual dinner, but no less charged. Evelyn and Richard were there, along with a few cousins, their chatter focused on Clara's new role at Data Weave. "You're practically running the place," Richard boomed, clapping Clara's shoulder. Clara smiled, but her eyes found Sophie, who sat quietly slicing a grapefruit. "Actually," Clara said, her voice cutting through the noise, "I'm learning a lot from the real genius at DataWeave. Sophie's the one who built it. Co-founder, lead architect, the whole deal." The table fell silent, forks pausing mid-air. Evelyn blinked, confused. "Sophie, dear, is that true?" Sophie looked up, her expression calm but surprised. "It's true," she said simply, her voice steady. "I've been working on it for a while." The cousins erupted in questions, but Clara's gaze stayed on Sophie, a silent apology in her eyes. Sophie nodded, just once, and the moment passed. But it was a start. Over the next weeks, the sisters rebuilt their bond, not through grand gestures, but through small, genuine acts. Clara defended Sophie's ideas in meetings, her advocacy fierce but respectful. Sophie, in turn, offered quiet support, slipping Clara a note after a tough presentation. "You nailed it, keep going." They didn't talk about the past, not yet, but the space between them softened, filled with mutual respect. One evening, as they left the office together, Clara stopped, her voice low. "Soph, why didn't you tell me? All those years, I was such an idiot and you just let me." Sophie smiled, her eyes catching the city lights. "I didn't need you to know, Clara. I needed you to see." She paused, then added, "You're seeing now. That's enough." Clara nodded, her throat tight. The sisters walked on, their steps in sync, the city sprawling before them. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, they faced it together. The gala had been the spark, the brunch the bridge, but the true transformation was in the quiet moments, the shared glances, the unspoken apologies, the slow rebuilding of trust. Sophie's choice of silence had been her power, but her willingness to step into the light had been her gift. Clara's humility, hard-won and fragile, was her offering in return. The Hawthorne sisters, once divided by spotlight and shadow, were finding a new rhythm, one where both could shine. Thank you for diving into the world of Sophie and Clara, where silence speaks louder than spotlight and truth reshapes bonds. Your passion for their journey fuels this story, and I can't wait to share what lies ahead. Stay curious, keep guessing, and let's unravel the next chapter together. Until then, what do you think Sophie's next move will be? With gratitude.